That's when Donald Trump learned that threatening America's biggest economic partner had unintended repercussions. Boardrooms throughout Manhattan are frightened by this image this morning. Red numbers are currently tumbling down trade terminals on the screens of the New York Stock Exchange. Analysts will be hurriedly phoning their Toronto counterparts, and you'll witness the telltale indication of a strategic error occurring in real time. At 5:47 a.m. on Monday, February 23rd, 2026, Eastern Standard Time, Donald Trump unleashed what he thought would be his greatest blow against Canada, a 25% tax on all goods from Canada. Just a social media message that was meant to bring Canada to its knees. No negotiation, no warning. The global economic system has been rocked by what transpired next. The newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, has just been given what Trump believed to be an impossible situation. He is already handling a delicate transition of power, dealing with pressure from his own party to demonstrate his economic credentials and navigating the complicated relationship between Ottawa and Washington. However, Carney did something that has left Trump's team in a panic. Instead of making frantic phone calls pleading for forgiveness, he reacted in 9 minutes with a response that was so well planned and destructive that it totally changed the balance of power between these two countries. We will disclose all that transpired throughout those 9 minutes in this in-depth analysis. We will reveal the emergency meetings that are currently taking place in the West Wing. We'll show you the confidential discussions that take place between American CEOs and their legal departments as they come to terms with the implications for their financial performance. And we'll show you why this one instance may be the most convincing proof yet that Donald Trump lacks a basic misunderstanding of the nature of power in the contemporary global economy. It's not only that Trump is losing this battle, he's observing in real time as someone who genuinely comprehends international economics, turns his defining political weapon, the threat of tariffs, against him. At a meandering address at Mar-a-Lago 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump declared that he was sick of Canada exploiting the United States. Massive tariffs on Canadian goods were to be imposed. It was intended to compel Canada to renegotiate trade agreements on terms that would benefit American interests. It was meant to be a display of power to prove that no one, not even its nearest neighbor, would be able to intimidate America under Trump. He assured his supporters that manufacturing jobs would return across the border as a result of this. He pledged that Canada would be forced to agree to whatever conditions he set. He depicted Canadian officials arriving in Washington, desperation and humility, prepared to sign any document that was presented to them. However, the cost went beyond simply disrupting the economy. 70 years of economic cooperation in North America had been completely abandoned. This required dismantling supply networks that American businesses had developed over many years. In order to undertake long-term investments, corporations had to give up the predictability. This was a betrayal of the basic tenet that democracies do not engage in economic warfare. Canadian company leaders retaliated right away. They contended that American businesses would suffer equally to Canadian ones as a result of integrated supply chains. They noted that before a car is completed, auto parts must cross the border 7 times. They clarified that Canadian agriculture is essential to American grocery retailers. But Trump dismissed these concerns with a wave of his hand. He referred to them as scare tactics. They didn't comprehend negotiating, he claimed, because Canada needs American markets more than America needs Canadian resources. Trump bet that they would never respond. He believed that a smaller economy will inevitably falter when faced with a bigger one. He thought that Mark Carney, who had just been elected and was unfamiliar with this type of conflict, would blink first. He made a mistaken assumption. 11:43 a.m. Donald Trump made a post on Truth Social on Thursday, February 20th, 2026. The message was brief, harsh, and intended to be as shocking as possible. all Canadian goods entering the U.S. would be subject to a 25% tariff as of right now. No phase period, no exclusions, just a sudden drop of an economic hammer. For 4 minutes there was quiet. The events had not yet been completely absorbed by financial markets. The consequences were still being calculated by trading algorithms. It is likely that Canadian officials were still reviewing the information to make sure it was authentic and not a communication glitch. Next, at 11:52 a.m., Mark Carney made an appearance in front of cameras in Ottawa precisely 9 minutes after Trump's post. There were no teleprompters or notes, just a man who had been the governor of the Bank of England for years and knew exactly how to react to risks to the economy. He declared that American goods will be subject to immediate reciprocal duties. He didn't stop there, though. He declared that Canada would start looking into alternate economic alliances with Asia and the European Union. He declared that the impacted Canadian industries will receive immediate financial assistance. In the most disastrous action, he said that Canada will limit energy exports to some U.S. states that depend on Canadian natural gas and power. Carney was reported by many present as being completely composed. The calm tone of someone describing a mathematical equation without a raised voice or obvious agitation. There could have been no more stark contrast with Trump's blustery declaration. However, this was only the start. At the time of Carney's speech in Ottawa, the New York Stock Exchange was on the verge of collapse. In just a few minutes, shares of U.S. automakers fell 4%. Midwest energy stocks started to decline. Traders were urgently attempting to estimate the true cost of a full-scale trade war with Canada. Provincial leaders in Canada were already on conference conversations with their American counterparts at that very moment. Auto CEOs were calling the governor of Michigan to ask what this meant for their factories. Montana's governor was being briefed on the possibility of Canadian energy shortages. The flow of natural gas ceased. Most startlingly, 3 significant American corporate lobbying groups had released statements criticizing Trump's tariffs within 15 minutes of Carney's answer. Not worried, not warning, just outright against them. The American Petroleum Institute, the National Association of Manufacturers, and the Chamber of Commerce all broke with a serving president in real time. By the end, the S&P 500 had fallen 127 points. In less than 6 hours, the market worth of more than $400 billion vanished. Analysts were running scenarios on the screens at Wall Street trading desks. What if things get out of hand? What if Canada truly carries through? What happens if other nations observe this and conclude that Trump's threats are pointless? Tough rhetoric on social media doesn't matter to the market. Stable foreign relations and a predictable trade policy are important to it. And on February 20th, it witnessed neither. Leaks from White House insiders claim that at 12:30 p.m., an emergency meeting was convened. Trump's chief of staff, his remaining economic advisors, and a few congressional leaders who were urgently calling to ask what the hell was going on were among the participants. The subject was not how to intensify the tariffs. How to halt the bleeding was the question. Sources acquainted with the conversation have informed us that the meeting did not proceed smoothly. According to reports, one aide asked Trump directly if he had war-gamed Canada's response. In response, Trump reportedly said he didn't believe Canada would have the courage to defend itself. Another advisor emphasized that Mark Carney was not a novice who could be frightened because he had really controlled the Bank of England and the British economy during Brexit. Although the meeting's transcript has not been made public, others claim that the irritation was clear. These were many who had been warning for weeks that threatening China or Mexico was not the same as threatening Canada. Canada had choices. Canada had allies. Above all, Canada had a fresh leader who had nothing to lose by opposing Trump. Carney made the icy, well-considered political choice. They considered how Trump's announcement would negatively impact Canadian exporters in the near future. They examined the political pressure Carney faced to demonstrate his resilience in the face of American aggression. They considered the next Canadian election cycle, where it would be disastrous to be perceived as lacking sovereignty. They became aware that Trump had simply provided them with the ideal chance to position Carney as a capable global leader. In just 9 minutes, a decision was made. Retaliate right away. Retaliate forcefully and make it plain that Canada would not fulfill the role that Trump had outlined for them. According to insiders, one advisor questioned whether Carney's team should wait to coordinate with supporters while they were putting out his response. Carney apparently gave a straightforward response. No, we reply right now. By acting alone, we demonstrate to the world that endangering Canada has repercussions. Carney did this, but why? Pay attention to the political rewards. The Canadian economic elite created Mark Carney, former international financial regulator, former central banker, and technocrat who was elected on the platform of capable economic management. However, capable managers are not reelected. Bullies are confronted by strong leaders. His supporters desired predictability and consistency in trade policy. However, they also desired a prime minister who would not be intimidated. Carney and his inner circle reportedly held many scenario planning meetings to discuss what to do in the event that Trump attempted this very maneuver. According to sources, they were prepared. The 9-minute response was not spontaneous. It was waiting for the trigger and had been planned in a way that was unimaginable 6 months ago. This transfers power from Washington to Ottawa. Threatening neighbors will no longer result in obedience, according to Trump. Economic size is no longer sufficient for him to prevail in conflicts. Since this response went against every presumption his team was operating under, he is no longer able to forecast how adversaries will react. He is only a man with a social media account and a history of making threats that frequently have the opposite effect of what he wants. Trump believed he was isolating a weaker economy by hitting Canada. He chose to isolate himself instead. When financial markets penalize your statement, when American business organizations swiftly oppose your proposal, and when your own governors are frantically phoning the White House, you have made a grave mistake. The 9-minute reversal, as history will refer to it. This is a coordinated international pushback against the United States' unilateral move. This is not a debate over commerce. The way that America's allies and neighbors react to economic threats has fundamentally changed. The consequences for the law are growing. The trade agreement that Trump personally negotiated and signed, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, contains particular clauses regarding tariffs. According to legal experts, Trump's unilateral action goes against the pact that he personally supported. Canada has said that it will use the dispute resolution procedure to file official complaints, tariff schedule violations, most favored nation provisions, and procedural procedures for tariff adjustments are among the allegations. Canada is not the only country retaliating. Trump's own agreement is being used against him by Canada. A wider crisis of trust in American treaty commitments may result if this case is taken to a dispute panel and the United States loses. It would demonstrate to the world that the United States enters into commitments that it does not intend to uphold. This is the cascading impact that worries economists. American businesses that rely on Canadian imports will face an overnight 25% increase in expenses if these tariffs remain in place. Inflation increases if those businesses pass expenses on to customers. Profits plummet and stock prices rise if they absorb the costs. Power outages could occur in some areas of the Midwest of the United States if Canada's energy limitations are implemented. Factories close when there are power outages. In swing states, unemployment rises when manufacturers close. Trump's political coalition disintegrates if unemployment increases in battleground states. We are examining a situation in which Trump's efforts to appear resilient may cause a recession in the same areas that make up his support base. The European Union is keeping a careful eye on this. They witness a Canadian prime minister successfully opposing American economic aggression. They perceive Trump's action being punished by American markets. They are determining if this is the right time to counteract additional Trump threats. It is simpler to further isolate a desperate Trump on other subjects as he watches his hallmark move backfire and gets isolated. China is keeping an eye on it and making notes. They see that prompt, well-coordinated counterattack is effective. They observe that Trump's warnings are becoming less and less credible. As a result, they are shifting their own trading tactics. Elon Musk is where? Trump's most well-known business partner. Quiet. Cross-border supply channels are essential to Musk's businesses. Canadian parts are used in his American facilities. Like everyone else, his bottom line is being impacted by this trade war. The parade of CEOs who attended banquets at Mar-a-Lago is nowhere to be seen. Quiet. They are discussing ways to protect themselves from a president who makes significant economic decisions with their boards and attorneys. Policies through social media without seeking input from others. Why was there no sound? Due to the simplicity of their computation. Supporting Trump on this issue entails endorsing a billions-dollar policy. They're pulling away as quickly as they can. Trump's coalition becomes irreparably divided as a result. On the one hand, there is the populist base that reacts to the language of American strength, loves the concept of being tough with Canada, and doesn't give a damn about corporate complaints or market reactions. Conversely, there are economic interests that support Republican elections, require stable trade policy, and are seeing a decline in their stock portfolios as a result of Trump's impetuous actions. Elections cannot be won by a coalition that is split. Long-term power cannot be held by a Republican Party divided between companies that rely on trade and populists that favor trade wars. According to reports from people close to Trump, the president is obsessed with the media attention. He is watching news outlets juxtapose his own irate social media messages with Mark Carney's cool-headed, collected answer. He's browsing through company executives' responses. He constantly questioning his employees about why the market is down, why his harsh position isn't being celebrated, and why Canada didn't collapse right away as he had feared. He's seeing what occurs when the story he's telling doesn't align with reality. Constructed. According to reports, staff are attempting to control his access to polling data that indicates independent voters are becoming less supportive of the trade war. They are attempting to protect him from the increasing number of Republicans in Congress who are privately voicing their concerns. The crash of the stock market is more than simply a metaphor. It's a report card. Thousands of experienced investors are represented by it, those who are responsible for appropriately pricing opportunity and risk. Everybody agreeing at once that Trump's Canada policy increases instability and poverty in America. It symbolizes the general consensus that this administration is behaving in opposition to American interests, financial interests. Trump wished to appear powerful. In the end, he displayed impulsivity. His goal was to subjugate Canada. In the end, he brought Canadian politics together around a leader who is today seen as a hero for confronting the bully next door. Where are we now? Trump is in Mar-a-Lago with a dwindling group of advisors who are becoming more and more reluctant to inform him that his approach is failing. He has been betrayed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Midwestern energy companies have betrayed him. The automakers have betrayed him. In international issues, his own trade deal is being used as evidence against him. In addition to being the president of the United States, he has no influence over the outcomes of his own choices. He can post on social media, but he can't make Canada comply. He has the authority to impose tariffs, but he cannot stop American companies from bearing the costs. Despite having official authority, he lacks the essential capacity to carry out his declared objectives. Expect escalation as we move into the next stage of this crisis. In an attempt to prove he was correct, Trump will make a concerted effort to announce even more severe sanctions. He may attempt to impose tariffs on further Canadian industries. He might even threaten to completely leave the USMCA, which would start a full-scale trade war throughout North America. This, however, cannot be reversed. The proof that threatening Canada results in swift, well-planned, and destructive reaction. International relations classes will examine the 9 minutes between Trump's post and Carney's answer as the point at which the presumption of American economic domination through threats was disproved. There is no going back to the old strategy when a president initiates a trade war with America's closest ally and is punished by the markets. The delusion that economic bullying has no repercussions is broken. The American business community no longer has faith in Trump. When within hours of its unveiling, your own Chamber of Commerce objects to your signature policy, when your decisions cause stocks to plummet, when a foreign leader responds more quickly and intelligently than you can rebut, making you appear weak. You never get your credibility back. Sign up. For the next 90 days, we will keep an eye on the dispute resolution panel procedures. We will discuss the specific implications for future U.S. trade policy if Canada prevails in its legal challenge to these penalties. At this point, the world discovered that Mark Donald Trump is still trying to understand what happened when Carney responds in 9 minutes. Pay close attention. Pay.